Good morning and thank you for joining us on Africa This Morning. It is the 2nd of May 2014. My name is Beryl Oro. Let's start the bulletin with a look at the top stories.
Labor Day. Protests mark May Day celebrations around the world. Nigeria abductions. Hundreds take to the streets to press for release of 230 abducted schoolgirls. Ukraine bailout. The IMF approves $17 billion loan for Ukraine. South Sudan crisis. The UN vows to prevent Sudan from sliding into genocide.
Kenyan workers will not get a salary increase this year. Labour Cabinet Secretary Kazungu Kambi appealed for more time, saying the government will consult workers' unions and employers and adjust the wages depending on the performance of the economy. Kamene Goro with that report.
The Labor Day celebrations were a display of pomp and color as Kenya joined the rest of the world in marking the auspicious day. Now, various industries involved in the vast labor sector displayed their very best, highlighting the great steps the country achieved in the labor market. With the procession came hope that the government was going to adjust wages upwards, but Labor Cabinet Secretary Kazungu Kambi delivered the bad news. Workers will not get a salary increase. Now, he appealed to the workers to give the government more time.
I know as a government, the government position, as I mentioned to you earlier, that we have discussed with the Federation of Kenya Employers, with the workers' unions, and we have agreed that before this year ends, we will be able, after ascertaining how our economic indexes are, then that is the time we will increase salaries accordingly.
Employers in Kenya had requested the government not to announce the new minimum wages, citing various reasons. On the other hand, the Federation of Kenya Employers chairperson Jacqueline Mugo noted the impressive display of the economic production capability of the country as an indication that the power to push the country's economy forward lies solely on the workers and employers.
Today, as I sat and watched the procession after procession that went by, I realized the power of the workers and the power of the employers to drive our economy forward. The men and women who are gathered here today have played a key role in shaping the economy of this country, and I believe it is only fair that we honor them.
Remarkable moves made by the labor sector included the development of a market information system alongside the launch of a national manpower survey set to be released later this month. But at the end of the day, Kenyan workers went home empty-handed, their hopes for a better wage bill dashed in the heat of the generous sun.
I was very disappointed. I thought we would be given an increase, but unfortunately, it didn't happen.
In all honesty, it was not all that bad, but we expected at least to have an increment. But now, as we leave, it's not clear. We have no hopes. We're returning the same way we came.
KOTU Secretary General Francis Atwoli urged Kenyans to stop politicizing labor-related matters. The Labor Day celebrations came to an end in Nairobi with one main contention for both the government and the labor sector leaders, that labor-related matters should not be politicized. Reporting at Uhuru Park for Ebro Africa TV, I'm Kamene Goro.
Still on labor celebrations in the country, as labor unions affiliated to the Central Organization of Trade Unions were celebrating Labor Day at the Uhuru Park, rival union Presetu was holding a procession in the streets of Nairobi after their attempts to join the function were thwarted by security officers. Sam Gakunyi with that report.
Newly launched labor organization Public Servants Trade Unions of Kenya, PUSETU officials and allied workers tried to access Uhuru Park to join other workers in marking Labor Day. Approximately 200 meters from Uhuru Park, they met a contingent of officers who denied them access.
Let us go back. No. You are not going. No, you are not. Please.
After a brief argument with the officers,
the PUSETU members at this particular point were asked to retreat. Their Labor Day celebration plans were thwarted.
If you want to put a nice clothes, yeah, it has to match the occasion. So if they have to talk together, then it means there will be no distance in this.
They went back to where it all began, outside the Kenya National Union of Teachers.
Solidarity forever, for the union makes us strong.
Here, PUSETU officials lashed out at KOTU, accusing the union of misleading workers.
Workers are completely unable to carry out self-development projects such as sound investment. Hence, their families live in a circus of poverty. The overall effect is that as a country, we are unlikely to meet one of the Millennium Development Goals, namely eradication of poverty.
The union is now threatening to call a nationwide strike if its representatives are not considered for appointment in government boards.
We are proposing to the PUSETU board that from here we move and demand for our rightful slot in the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, the National Hospital Insurance Fund, the National Labor Board, and the legitimate center that represents workers of this country within Kenya and outside Kenya and at ILO. If the government fails to do so, mnanisikia? If the government fails to do so, then we are recommending a nationwide general strike in the entire public service.
Public Servants Trade Unions of Kenya that boasts of over 600,000 members has now retreated to start planning how they'll host the 2015 Labor Day celebrations. The big question is, will the supremacy battles between KOTU and PUSETU be solved? Sam Gakunyi, Ebru Africa News, Nairobi, Kenya.
Thousands of people hit the streets around the world to mark the International Labor Day. In some countries, the protests turned violent as the police fired tear gas to disperse protesters. Agnes Gakunga brings us a report on workers across the world demanding for better working conditions.
In Istanbul, Turkey, police dispersed hundreds of protesters who tried to defy a ban on demonstrations on the city's Taksim Square on the anniversary of clashes that spawned a nationwide protest movement. The square has been the scene of protests that have dogged the government for months. Rallies also took place across Asia, including Hong Kong, Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, Taipei, and Seoul, where the annual protest was expected to take a somber tone in the wake of the South Korean ferry disaster. Meanwhile, Russian workers were to parade on Red Square for the first time since 1991. The latest Soviet tradition to be revived as a wave of patriotism sweeps the country. May Day was a key date in the Soviet calendar, with elaborate celebrations involving ranks of marching athletes, soldiers and workers on the Moscow Square. But in recent years, the annual demonstrations have been relegated to a city highway. In Hong Kong, union organizers said some 5,000 people were set to join their march from the city's Victoria Park to government headquarters, with better working hours top of the agenda. In Zimbabwe, the Labor Day celebrations were not embraced by many workers.
Workers' Day is no longer celebrated like what we used to do long back. This year is totally different. A lot of people I can say some of them are ignoring it because there's nothing to celebrate.
Meanwhile, in Taiwan, thousands of workers marched to the labor ministry demanding wage hikes and a ban on companies hiring cheap temporary or part-time workers. This year's Labor Day celebrations in Seoul were overshadowed by the ferry disaster that claimed many lives. And as instability continues to plague Ukraine, thousands took part in a rally in Kiev to push for peace and better working conditions.
From protests on workers' rights to Nigeria, where hundreds of protesters marched through the streets of Abuja to press for the release of 230 schoolgirls abducted by militants 2 weeks ago. They marched to the National Assembly to hand over a letter to complain that the government was not doing enough to secure the release of the girls.
Scores of suspected Boko Haram gunmen stormed an all-girls secondary school in the village of Chibok in Borno State, packing the teenagers onto trucks and disappearing into a remote hilly area along the Cameroon border. Some girls have managed to go back home, but others are still being held, some believed to have been married off to fighters. Anger has mounted in recent days over the abductions. Parents have criticized the government's search and rescue efforts, and the number of missing girls has been disputed. The protest labeled the Million Woman March had been called by the Women for Peace and Justice organization. The demonstrators began their march outside the Hilton Abuja, one of Africa's most expensive hotels, where in a week's time, Nigeria will be hosting the World Economic Forum under tight security.
I personally believe that not enough is being done to rescue our daughters. Please recollect, like 2-3 months ago, 25 girls were abducted from Kwanduga because the nation has not risen in unison to do something about those 25 girls abducted in Kwanduga. It is now possible to abduct another 200 plus. Next time, maybe it will be more. Each and every one of us needs to do something to arrest the unpleasant developments, that are happening in the country, especially in the Northeast.
The scale and brutality of the school attack shocked a nation already long used to hearing about atrocities in an increasingly bloody 5-year-old insurgency.
We are so frustrated at the fact that 234 children could get missing, and there's actually no coherent explanation as to exactly the search and rescue operation that's going on concerning them.
The abduction has also become a symbol of the military's impotence in protecting civilians against insurgents, whose attacks appear to be getting less discriminating. President Goodluck Jonathan has said security forces are doing all they can to find the girls aged between 15 and 18.
To South Sudan, top United Nations rights officials have vowed to do everything in their power to prevent conflict-racked South Sudan from sliding into genocide. The UN has also warned the warring factions that they would be held responsible.
The visit by UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Navi Pillay was prompted by a rebel attack on the South Sudanese oil hub of Bentiu this month that left hundreds dead, and a revenge assault by rivals on people sheltering in a UN base. The delegation noted that a personal power struggle between South Sudan's leaders is driving Africa's newest nation to a catastrophe. According to the United Nations rights chief, the warring factions are doing much to steer South Sudan to stability.
Unfortunately, virtually everything I have seen or heard on this mission has reinforced the view that the country's leaders, instead of seizing their chance to steer their impoverished and war-battered young nation to stability and greater prosperity, have instead embarked on a personal power struggle that has brought their people to the verge of catastrophe.
Hello.
After meeting the two leaders, President Kiir and rebel leader Riek Machar, Pillay was categorical that the UN will not allow war-torn South Sudan become another Rwanda.
The deadly mix of recrimination, hate speech, and revenge killings that has developed relentlessly over the past 4.5 months seems to be reaching boiling point, and I have been increasingly concerned that neither South Sudan's political leaders nor the international community at large seem to perceive quite how dangerous the situation now is.
The mediators also warned that both sides would be held to account for any rights abuses. Rights groups have said both parties may have carried out war crimes which could lead to prosecutions. Thousands have been killed in the brutal 4-month civil war, and more than 1 million have fled their homes. There has been little respite in the killings since fighting first erupted in mid-December, despite a January ceasefire.
Families living in Machakos, an area synonymous with severe water and food shortages, have been craving for what everyone needs to survive: water. In a bid to ensure that residents access clean water, the Machakos County government has embarked on an ambitious project to boost water supply. Ebru Africa's news reporter Agnes Gakunga was in Machakos, where she witnessed women trekking long distances to get water for their families' basic needs.
Dry rivers, empty water tanks, and women struggling to fetch water from the available sources is what welcomes us to Masinga constituency in Machakos County. These ugly pictures may be perceived as an irony, considering the fame that comes with the area's scenic Masinga Dam that was constructed in the 1960s to generate hydropower. The vast Ukambani region is well known for huge water shortage, a problem that the area population has been forced to live with for so many years. Now, this dry river is a clear indication that people here travel many kilometers in search of clean water for consumption. Women breaking their backs carrying water as men struggle to take livestock to available watering sources. But all that might be past tense now, thanks to the Machakos County government, which has set aside funds to drill at least 800 boreholes to bring to an end the water shortage.
For centuries, we have labored as donkeys walking kilometers and digging dry riverbeds for water. Our mothers indeed have bent backs because of carrying mitungis of water for kilometers.
It is a long journey that Mutua believes will be completed and bring to an end the suffering and desperation of the people here.
Access to clean and available water is a right and not a privilege. We have started this journey of bringing water to each and every household of Machakos County. We are not interested in providing water points. We are not interested in providing just water sources nearby. We want each and every household of Machakos County in the next few years to have piped water. The farthest a mother will carry a mtungi of water will be 2 meters if the pipe is outside the door.
There are those few who are lucky to have a borehole in the neighborhood. To them, having clean water within their reach is something they are not taking for granted.
Life has really changed. At times, we used to sleep hungry because of lack of water to cook. We also never used to shower as we do today. Our cattle also have enough water now. It's such a relief.
Before this borehole was drilled in 2007 through a government project, the residents used to fetch water from this dam, which is about 8 kilometers away.
It was terrible because we could travel for 5-6 kilometers to fetch water. 5 going, 5 coming back, taking about 10 hours a whole day. And that you use for 2-3 days. You don't even wash your face in the morning. It's for eating, drinking, that is all. Ngombes could travel to the same place to fetch water, to drink water. And they could take for 1 or 2 days, a day to day, and then 2 days later. So it was bad, it was terrible.
The Machakos government dream is to have piped water in every homestead by 2015. If the dream to drill more than 800 such boreholes in the entire Machakos County by December this year becomes a reality, it will bring a sigh of relief to many, especially women, who struggle every single day in search of this precious commodity. Agnes Gakunga, Ebru Africa News, Masinga in Machakos County.
And finally, the International Monetary Fund has approved a $17 billion loan package for Ukraine if the country complies with specific economic reforms. The loan comes amid heightened military and political tension between Ukraine and its neighboring Russia. The IMF assistance pledged in March was hinged on economic reforms in Ukraine, including raising taxes, freezing the minimum wage, and raising energy prices. The steps could, however, affect Ukrainians negatively and strain the interim government's hold on power.
Urgent action was necessary. Decisive measures were taken by Ukraine, and decisive measures have just been taken by the IMF. So there has been a very strong endorsement for the program, which will release over the course of the next 2 years $17.1 billion in different installments over the course of those 2 years.
The aid will unlock further credits from other donors intended to help Ukraine stabilize its economy amid its worst civil turmoil since independence in 1991.
We believe that Ukraine has an opportunity to seize the moment, to break away from previous practices, both from a fiscal, from a monetary, and from a governance point of view.
The IMF expects Ukraine to implement major reforms in its energy and financial sectors, including raising the price of gas for domestic consumers. The government, in power until elections on May 25th, has already promised to raise gas prices more than 50%.
It's a program which has implementation risks. It's one where we are trying to mitigate the risk as much as we can. We have had prior actions which have been addressed satisfactorily. We will have what I would call high-frequency review, because there will be review of the performance every 2 months in the first sequence, in order to make sure that that determination is actually followed through.
Ukrainian authorities have said the economy will contract by 3% by the end of this year as a result of chaos and mismanagement. Economic output fell by 1.1% in the first 3 months of the year. The political unrest makes it even more difficult for Ukraine to get its economy back into shape, even though the country's new government pledged to pursue politically unpopular reforms as a condition for receiving the IMF aid. That story brings us to the end of the Bulletin on Africa this morning. Join us next as we take a look at other stories making the lead on the 2nd of May on our social media platform in our segment on Trend.